guys, welcome to our Serving Sunday. This is something that we do every single month on the second weekend of the month, and it's a chance where we just pause and think a little bit about who we are called to be and how we are called to be as we follow Jesus with our whole life. So if it's the first time that you're joining us, you're so welcome. Thanks for tuning into our YouTube channel. Today we're having a little think about eating. As a habit and a practice, Jesus ate with people. In fact, most of the stories we have in the Bible are stories of when Jesus sat down with a friend, with somebody who he wanted to spend time with, and he ate with them. And I know that it seems a bit silly maybe for us to think about this currently because we can't sit down with very many people and obviously eat. However, I still believe that we've got something to learn from the practices of Jesus, and not just for our normal life, but for today in the middle of lockdown. So this is what we're going to be thinking about this morning. So I hope you guys are up for some challenging conversations and to think a little bit about how you can take what we're thinking about this morning into your daily life. What are your habits? Like, I don't mean bad ones or good ones, just generally, like what habits mark your life? If someone was to hang out with you for a day, what habits would they say you have? Now, some people might think, oh my goodness, I'm so glad somebody's not living with me because you have habits that you wouldn't want people to know about. We all have good habits and we all have habits that we might want to change. But actually, our whole world is geared around habits, whether we realize it or not. Habits aren't programs. Habits aren't, single choices we make. They're repeated behavior that we subconsciously carry out. So I have a habit of brushing my teeth before I go to bed. I have a habit of, having a shower when I get up in the morning. I have a habit of eating breakfast, lunch, dinner. I have a habit of doing something at a certain time of the week. We all have habits in our lives, and some of these are good, and some of these are things that we maybe would want to change. So I want you to think about, what habits do you have in your life? Do they reflect your faith? Do they reflect values that Jesus held? Or maybe they don't seem that close to who Jesus was. I want you to have a think about that. Carl Jung said this: you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. And I know that seems maybe obvious, but actually think about that. We are what we do, not what we say we'll do. And often we say we are going to do so many things, but in reality, we don't do them. So actually, we are more about what we do than maybe what we don't say we are going to do. So what things do you say you're going to do, but you don't carry them out? So maybe it's, I'm going to work out, how many times a week, or I'm going to eat this how many times a week, or I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's all very well to say those things, but it's not until we do them that actually the difference happens. You are what you repeatedly do. And I know that's something you maybe don't want to hear, but it is true. I am what I repeatedly do. And I want to think a little bit about this in terms of our habits and faith. Faith, therefore, is not an act. It's not a single choice. Faith is actually a habit. So what habits with your faith do you have in your life? There are habits around us the whole time. There's habits in our society, and we tend to kind of subscribe to them without even realizing it. So we grow up in a society that says that, do you know what, it's important to be successful, it's important to have a career, it's important to settle down at a certain age, it's important to have a house, to own your house, it's important to have a family, for your family to be a certain way. None of those things are bad, but they are kind of preset habits, systems, norms, society norms that our society holds, that when we grow up, we either fit into that place or we don't, and we tend to notice when we don't because we don't feel accepted by other people. Those are norms on society. Now, nothing to say those things are bad, not at all, but it shows us that actually we adhere to habits subconsciously the whole time. And that impacts also how we then view those things, and ultimately then how we view the habit of faith and the place it holds in our lives. Jesus had habits. Do you know, we don't have lots of stories about Jesus' career, do we? We have stories about how he acted, who he acted towards, the habits he kept, particularly around things like eating and drinking that we're going to be thinking a bit about today. Our habits are ultimately formed by the values we have. So the values you adhere to will create habits in your life. So, if your value is, I want to work hard, I want to have a work ethic, I want to be really successful in my life, that is what's going to motivate you. That's going to be a value that you're running after, which creates habits in your life, and those habits are going to be all around that value you have. Now, what does it look like then for us as believers, as Jesus followers, to have values that are faith focused and help us create habits that are faith focused? It's not to say that we get rid of those things, but if we want to be intentional, if we want to do the things we say we're going to do, they have to become habits. They can't just stay as words. And I mean that in terms of faith. What is shaping your values? Where does that come from? I want you to think a little bit about that as we think more about what it means for us to be faith-filled people who follow Jesus. Not on a Sunday morning, not on a Monday night, every single part of our lives. What does that look like? And are there habits that we need to be putting in place to help us do that? So I've got a question. What would surprise your friends that they would question your motivations and provide them with opportunities to talk about faith in Jesus? What would have to happen in your life for people around you who don't yet know Jesus to start to question that there was something different about your life because of the habits, the rhythms of life that you had? What would it be? What would it look like? A faith habit can't be that I go to church on a Sunday morning. A faith habit can't be that I'm part of a group on a Monday night. It's not to say those things aren't important, but if that is literally the limit of our faith, then no wonder nobody else wants to know about God. No wonder that nobody else wants to know about what that looks like to follow God with our lives, because they associate that as a group for something that we do privately. Following Jesus is so much more than that. And I want us to read a little bit about that in the Bible. We want to grow the kingdom in all our lives, all of the time. We want faith to be this thing that is part of every part of my life and not compartmentalized to a couple of things that I do every week. So what does it look like for us to form habits that are life-giving? I'm not talking about putting something more on us. I'm not talking about draining us. I'm talking about us having habits daily, weekly, monthly that cultivate God's kingdom and grow it not just in our lives but in our families and those around us. So for this series, we're looking at this book here, and I really recommend that if you're the kind of person who likes to read, go check it out. And if you don't, look, it's super thin, go check it, it's really good. It's called Surprise the World, The 5 Habits of Highly Missional People. And last month we were talking about how we could bless people. Guys, how did you get on choosing 3 people to bless? With words of encouragement, acts of kindness, and giving them your time. Those were all things that we can do in COVID. And so I'd love to know how you got on. Please let me know. This month we're talking about the second habit, about sharing food, about creating space for somebody else in our lives. And again, we're going to be given a challenge to get hold of from the next weeks coming. But pick up this book, it's really, really good. There's lots of places that you can buy that. But I want to read a little bit about the way Jesus was with people, which is what I want to focus on today. This is what it says. Mike Breen is talking about the examples of how Jesus described himself and who he was. He said this about himself: the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So this is what it's saying, is Jesus came as God to the world, and that he came to serve and to love other people. That's Mark 10:45. Luke 19 says this: the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus came to this world for the least, the last, and the lost, the people who society don't want anything to do with. And that's going to be something we're going to come back to in a minute. And then the last bit is this, is Luke 7:34. The Son of Man came eating and drinking. I love this, and it is so, so true. Jesus spent a lot of time eating and drinking with people. But he ate and drank with people who we maybe wouldn't choose on our guest list. Jesus hung around with sinners, he's hung around with tax collectors, he hung around with prostitutes. Now, we don't give those labels necessarily to people today, but who would the equivalent people be today? Those people would be who Jesus would have a dinner party with. Those are the people he'd have a coffee with. Those are the people he made time for. That's what it means when he said that Jesus came for the lost. He came for the people whose lives are really messed up. He came for the people who don't have it together. He came for the people who desperately needed help. And it challenges our perception of what it means to hang out with God. We somehow think we have to have our lives sorted to hang out with God, and in fact, the very opposite is true. Historically, in Jesus' culture, if you were to be invited to a banquet, there was a ranking system. The people with the best behaviour, the best family background, the best etiquette, the best popularity, whatever you want to call it, they got to sit near the top of the table with the hosts. And if you didn't make the cut, well, depending on where you'd ranked, you were right down to the bottom. You were served last, you were treated last, you were spoken to last. Jesus challenges that because he says the very opposite. He says he came for the last. He came for the lost and the least. which means he came for the messiest in society, he came for the most broken in society, he came for the most lost in society. It is them that Jesus wants to spend time with. It is them he wants to eat with. Now, as we think about the faith habits in our lives and we think about what it means to create space for other people, to eat and drink with them, there's a challenge there, isn't there, for us to think about eating and drinking with the least, the last and the lost. It's not inviting your friends for a party. It's not hanging out with a popular crowd. It's thinking about who are those people in our communities who maybe need that company today. Hospitality is a way of the heart. It's so much more than food. And Jesus tells us to eat together with other people. So this is the challenge that we're picking up this month at Village. We're thinking about how we can bless others through food. Now, no, we can't have people around for dinner, we can't have them around our table, but we can do some things. Why not take a break for work? Why not have a Zoom lunch? Why not meet somebody for a coffee and go for a walk? Maybe you have the financial ability to get somebody some food and send it to them, a nice parcel, a food hamper. What 3 things could you do for somebody each week? On average, we eat 21 meals a week, which sounds a lot of eating, doesn't it? So I'm not challenging you to have things in your life that are going to weigh you down, but I'm challenging us to pick 3 people each week that we somehow can share food with them, and intentionally round a virtual table or reality as we walk, we spend time. There's something about leveling a playing field, leveling of ourselves when we get down with somebody in their life and we make space for them. And there's something that happens around food. Jesus did it, and we see it through history, the importance of sharing food with people. It breaks down barriers, it breaks down social issues. And so we want to think about that this month. So I want you to pick somebody, maybe somebody within the church that you want to share some food with, in maybe some of the ways I've suggested. I also want you to pick somebody who doesn't have any faith background at all, and to think about how you maybe could just make space for them in your life, to bless them, encourage them. Maybe think back to some of the things we thought about last month, but over some food. So send them a food parcel, go grab a coffee and go for a walk, socially distance of course, or have a Zoom lunch or whatever it is that you want to do. But think creatively, how could you be sharing some food with people in your community? And then let us know. I want you to pick 3 people, and at least one of them needs to be somebody who doesn't have faith.